A spy plane that took off from a British Air Force base has been linked to a massacre of at least 30 Palestinians sheltering in a post office. Before we begin, I just want to point out that our investigations are powered by the public and we're trying to reach 3,000 supporters. If you want to become one of them, please hit the link below. I'm joined now by the investigative journalist Ian Overton, who's been investigating spy flights over Gaza for us. Ian, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, pleasure.
You wrote an article for Declassified investigating this spy flight, and we know that hundreds of these planes have been going towards Gaza throughout the war there. But how were you actually able to work out where this plane went in Gaza and tie it to a massacre?
So we've been following the number of flights that have left RAF Akrotiri in Cyprus and gone over towards Gaza. And sometimes they turn off their transponders and sometimes on a rare occasion they don't. And we've identified around 600 flights since 7th October 2023 that have left Akrotiri, seem to have circled around Gaza and gone back. This was generally, of the 600, we were looking at RAF flights taking out the vast majority. So this was the Shadow R1 flight. But we later found out that there were other flights leaving the RAF base in Cyprus and flying towards Gaza that weren't RAF flights but were subcontractors. And these were contracted via a company called Sierra Nevada. And was a Beechcraft flight. And what we found is on the 11th of December 2024, 24 hours before an Israeli Defense Force bombing run that ended up killing 30 and injuring 50 people in the Nuseirat refugee camp, that this Crook 11 flight, this subcontracted US-owned flight, had flown over the refugee camp.
Crucially, on that 11th of December flight, it seemed to leave its tracker on for the whole duration of the 3-hour mission, right?
Indeed. So normally they turn their transponders off. The reason for this might be because they don't want to be tracked. But in this case, there was an error. They kept their transponder on and we identified that the flight had occurred. And as a consequence of that, we've got some serious questions to ask the Ministry of Defence. Was there intel that was taken from this flight over the refugee camp that was then passed on to the Israeli Defense Force?
And one of those things that they kept very quiet was the fact that they were using this US contractor to fly some of the spy flights for them. There was one over Khan Yunis that was found by Palestine Deep Dive, where I think the Ministry of Defence confirmed to the Times newspaper that that flight was operating on behalf of the MOD. The one that you found, we should be clear, you went to the MOD several times to ask them to clarify, who was operating this flight. The plane's owned by a US private company. What was the response that they gave you to that question?
Well, I was really trying to get them to confirm or deny it, and they didn't do either. So one can only assume that there has been funding given to these subcontractors to do flight. We're not entirely sure about how much funding was used in December last year for the hire of these flights, but we do know that there were 3 separate contracts with Sierra Nevada Corporation in previous months. I mean, overall, there's not just a question of complicity. There's also, I think, a more totally neglected question here about taxpayers' money being spent in what a lot of people are incredibly uncomfortable of an engagement. So we've looked at all Cypriot companies, for instance, that have been given money by the UK government for giving petroleum to the RAF over the last 4 years, and almost £10 million worth of taxpayers' money has been spent on Cypriot companies, basically for aviation fuel.
And Ian, when I've doorstepped the Defence Secretary John Healey to ask why he's sharing intelligence with Israel, he insists that it's purely for the purposes of hostage rescue and that there are these supposed safeguards in place to prevent that intelligence being used for any other purposes. What do you make of that?
Well, the Intelligence Select Committee themselves have published a report that says that they have no guarantee as to what can be abused in terms of intelligence once it's left the UK's hands, that these things have a habit of being turned into things that you never intended them to be used. And we know that previous foreign secretaries have admitted that British intelligence has been used in human rights abuses. And it just seems unequivocal that if we've been sharing data with Israel for so many months now, the question is why has that data not led to a decline in the number of civilians being killed in Gaza if they're so alerted to the fact that we have landscaped and mapped the entirety of the Gaza Strip? The reality is that our intel data hasn't reduced civilian harm, or if it has, prove it to us. And I think the answer is they won't prove it to us because, as Keir Starmer himself said on a visit to Akrotiri in December last year, there are things we're doing here we can't talk about.
Even if it is just looking for hostages like they say, that's not without risk either, is it? Because you tracked a flight, I think this was in June or July last year, again, well, it flew towards Gaza, and then there was a major operation in Nuseirat refugee camp, one of the few operations that did rescue a handful of, I think, 4 Israeli hostages, but hundreds of Palestinians were killed in the course of that operation. And you noticed an uptick in the number of flights over Gaza in the fortnight before that massacre. And questions have been put to ministers in the House of Commons about whether any UK intelligence was shared for that operation, given that, suppose these flights are looking for hostages, and they won't even answer a straightforward question like that. So does that give you concerns that even if it has been used to find hostages, that's not without risks as well?
No, absolutely. I mean, even if they say we have found no hostages in this area, does that give carte blanche to the IDF to go on a bombing run? If they say we have found hostages, what does that mean in terms of then tracking individuals who are in that area and then following them back to their homes and then bombing their homes? So we must remember that this is within a wider framing where the IDF actually have an AI-driven targeting system called Where's Daddy? If you begin to track individuals on the ground, you can find out where they're going to sleep at night and then do a bombing run that not only kills them but also kills their entire family. We also know that there is this sort of unwavering support, partly as a consequence of years of cooperation during the so-called war on terror between the British military and the Israeli military, where there is lots of backroute communications. There are instances where the Israeli intelligence forces have come over and had briefings with our intelligence forces recently. We know that senior ranking military officers in the British military have gone over since the 7th of October to Israel to discuss high-level meetings. And none of these things, we know very little about what was discussed, what information is shared, and what the not just the overt relationships, but the covert relationships are as well.
And Action on Armed Violence, where you work in, you've investigated Britain's role in many different conflicts. Have you ever come across another conflict where Britain's sharing intelligence with a country whose Prime Minister is wanted by the International Criminal Court for alleged war crimes? Its former Defence Minister is also wanted by the International Criminal Court. The country is being investigated at the International Court of Justice for genocide. Its National Security Minister is sanctioned by the UK government, and yet intelligence sharing continues.
Absolutely not. I mean, this is a unique scenario where we seem to have this support for Israel that obviously is framed to some degree by Keir Starmer's fear of being called anti-Semitic, and I don't think that can be ignored from the framing. I think that there is this embedded support within the militaries. So, for instance, the recent British military attaché in Israel wrote a paper for the, as part of a sort of an educational program for the Israeli state about anti-Semitism and the weaponization of anti-Semitism in Europe. So, I mean, there are very deep-rooted relationships that are existing between Israel and the United Kingdom. We have obviously seen other media outlets, such as the BBC, heavily criticised as the lack of balance when it comes to reporting on the issue. We've seen a very weaponised lobby in the UK that is not only fueling money through Friends of Labour, but also an aggressive attack on any reporting on Gaza. We've seen the BBC suspending documentaries that should have been aired, and a whole variety of framings that goes beyond, I think, number 10, but into a wider support of Israel that doesn't seem to have got the memo about these accusations of extreme war crimes.
Thanks, Ian. I know we're both going to keep investigating this story and see what else we can find. If you're also concerned about British spy flights over Gaza, please share this video, and if you haven't already, subscribe to our channel. We're also trying to reach 3,000 paying subscribers this year, so there are more details on how you can sign up to that in the link below. Thanks for watching.